I'd like to introduce Joe Guerra, a marketing strategist with over 20 years experience from Microsoft, and he's a proud IMC alumnus. So everyone, please welcome Mr. Gura.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. There we go. All right, good. So hi there. It's great to be here today in Morgantown. I just want to off the bat say I've had a wonderful time meeting and getting to know a lot of you this week. When you're an old alumni like me, you know, you are kind of a fish out of water with you current students, and I felt so very much at home. So before we go anywhere with this presentation, thank you for that, and thank you for the great connections and conversations we've had over here the last 3 days. So hopefully I'll do my part this morning. We'll come away with a few things to think about in the time to come. I always learn a lot coming here to see you guys, and I hope we can just keep a good exchange going. So we're gonna have some fun today. Want to take care of a little housekeeping right off the bat. Now, I don't get good public speaking scores because I'm a good public speaker. In fact, I'm rather average. So I do, however, believe in the power of bribery. So good questions get good things. And I will not say more than that. So with that in mind, just to also level set a little bit, because I know I've talked to a lot of you, but I know I couldn't get to all of you. So to introduce myself, my name is Joe Gura. I'm an alumni of this program. I graduated in 2015, and I just noticed I had the sticker from the box on my hand. So we'll put that there. And so I graduated from this program in 2015, and I was really looking for a redirection of my career at the time. I was in a lot of other things, and now I'm more of a strategist, and I absolutely love what I do. So I work in, to give you some context, I work in the enterprise support offerings for Microsoft. I am the go-to-market strategy lead worldwide for what we call the enhanced solutions. These are like the most in-depth things where Microsoft's biggest experts move in with customers to really help them get the most out of their technology experience. You know, it's about really enhancing the outcomes and enhancing what people are trying to accomplish. And it's a wonderful, rewarding thing to do. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is a lot of the learnings I've picked up in the last few years. So it's not just the learnings I picked up in the program when I was here from 2013 to 2015, but also a bit of things I've seen over the years. As part of what I do, I work on the overall strategy. I develop the messaging and the positioning, and I'll share a little bit of process in that. And then beyond that, what I also get to do is see if it works. So you might have heard me say last night at the dinner, help me understand. So, you know, I have the cool job of writing it, but then walking up to sellers in the field around the world and seeing if it lands, and seeing if it sticks, and seeing what sells and what doesn't, and what moves and what doesn't. And so that's what I'd like to share a bit with you here today. So you spend a lot of time in airplanes, you get to think. And so that's what's kind of cool about, that's where this all kind of came from. So it's not going to be a 45-minute bit about airplane food like Jerry Seinfeld, so here we go. So other than that, about me, I was in corporate comms before I did marketing. I was in broadcasting before that as a producer in San Francisco. I'm a dad. I tell dad jokes. I'm a football fan. I obsess over the sport far too much, and I like to travel. And but more than anything, I'm a storyteller. I love stories. I really believe that storytelling is the most powerful force for persuasion and common good that us as human beings can possibly create. And in our time together today, we're going to look about the art and the science of winning with storytelling today. So we live and perform our work every day in a world of complexity. When it comes to platforms, we are literally in a land between time. The newspapers of 100 years ago sit side by side with the television of 50 years ago, sitting side by side with the mobile technology that came in a decade ago, sitting side by side with the streaming services and social that came in 5 years ago. We are completely inundated with options and ways to connect, but many fundamentals still remain the same. So with this complexity, it always kind of has me thinking, and we thought this got hard when cable TV got introduced in the 80s. So there is no shortage of ways we can tell a story. There's no shortage of ways we can land a story. But we also have to attempt to answer, what does success look like? And what can it look like? We've heard so much over the last several years. Clicks, tweets, trending topics, likes, hashtags, conversions, impressions, leads, Sales pipeline, cost per point, cost per thousand. Anybody got any more deals, revenue? What exactly are we trying to do? And while it's important to recognize that complexity and that nuance and the numerous ways, the numerous shades of gray we have, it's easy to forget one person when we build a plan. And it's our audience. There's a person in the middle of this. They're on the receiving end. And that person appreciates the fact that they can engage with the world on their own terms, and they enjoy the many different opportunities for interaction and self-expression in today's ecosystem. Today's human is modern, up with the times, connected 24/7. The last thing they see when they go to bed is their phone. The first thing they see when they wake up in the morning, their phone. And while everything about how this person interacts and touches the world has changed in the past century, today's person still has one thing in common with literally everyone that came before them. They have a need to belong. They have a need for inspiration, and they have a desire to aspire to a future state or vision of themselves. To feel truly connected, to fulfill this basic human need, you need to see yourself and your actions as part of the bigger picture. They need a story. Because people buy stories. It's quite that, that's the one truth I keep running into. And to be truly compelled to either change behavior or continue with an existing one, a person needs to be able to see themselves within the story being told. They need to see themselves as part of the greater vision, and through the simple, relatable, and motivational story. A story that's rooted in personality, credibility, and truth, and a story that convinces them to take action. Now, let's start with the most important part of our work, the audience. We have a tendency to splinter. We have a tendency to segment. We have a tendency to bifurcate and to really look at the people who we see our content as different constituencies. Now, we call them millennials, business decision makers, consumers, technical decision makers, soccer moms, NASCAR dads. Do we still do NASCAR dads? That might be old. Generation Y, digital natives, Generation Z, Generation AA, double B, I don't know. So when we do this, and while there is a lot of value in it, when we do this, we do assign them traits, however, and that's where I really wanted to one of the cool things about this conference has been how intertwined a lot of our content has been in this conference. You noticed last night the content about stereotyping and normalcy that came in from Kareth last night. And that's where we can sometimes run into trouble in this conversation. It is helpful to tailor our messaging and our strategy based on whom we want to connect with, but we need to never lose sight of who we are trying to reach and what exactly we'd like to motivate them to do. Because in the end, that is not a millennial reacting to something they saw on Snapchat. That is not a baby boomer responding to a direct mail piece. And that is not a business decision maker getting really animated and excited over that PowerPoint you made him. Those are people, and they are buying stories. The most important fundamental of marketing is that we are simply trying to influence human action, human decision. Strip away all of it, and that's all it ever is. That's all it ever was. Humans have been making decisions about what direction to take, what goods to acquire, and whom to partner with since the beginning of thought. And in all of these moments, a decision is needed. Judgment plays a part. Intellect plays a part. And at its most powerful, however, human decision-making is visceral. It's triggered. That's the best way to possibly describe it. We saw a lot of this in John's talk yesterday about how the left brain and the right brain can work together, but it's really much more of an emotional connection, an emotional decision. And when that visceral trigger is hit, it is absolute. This is the direction we're going, and the mind makes a clear choice to follow that path. Now, it is in that moment, that rainbow connection, so to speak, if we remember our Muppets, that we're trying to get to that point. That's where our impact as marketers is most consequential. And that visceral moment of human decision making. That's the moment a student decides on a college. That's the moment where a customer chooses your product. That is the moment where a business decision maker decides to hire your firm. And in that moment, all they're really buying is the promise of story. They haven't tested the product, they haven't touched the product, they haven't done anything. But you need to get them motivated to that point through the power of story. And so really, how do we get there? Well, these are the common threads I've observed over the years, so this is just a lot of my observation. Like we always like to say, why MMV? Your mileage may vary. But all the same, here's what I've seen it as. I see it as there are 3 common fundamentals to a successful story that gets us to inspire a visceral decision. First, a story has to be simple. People need to understand the story. Second, has to be relatable. They need to be able to see themselves as part of that story. You heard a little bit of this in yesterday's talk about diversity, the kickoff talk yesterday morning, about going into a community and making that connection with a group of people, making sure that they see you on you see them on their level and they see on yours. This is where that happens. And then finally, it has to be motivational or aspirational. They have to want to join that story. And across these fundamentals, there has to be a common human element involved throughout. And people buy stories that really contain personality, credibility, and truth. And we hear a lot, also to dovetail a little bit of what we heard about, we've heard a couple comments about fake news, right, in this conference, and about how do we help work around that. And look, I'm already confronting that beast right here, right now, before we even get to Q&A. This is where we make the most difference. Your own narrative that's not rooted in truth will only get you so far. This is the stories that will endure. These are the stories that people will buy. So now we've gone through, obviously, a lot of theory. And given that we're in an academic conference, I can sit here and do theory for another 3 hours if anyone would like. No? Okay, good. So in the consumer space, let's get to examples. We see this all the time in the consumer space, right? So story is everywhere in the consumer marketing landscape. No matter if you're selling life insurance or beer or cars, the fundamentals of story and human elements shine through every successful campaign. The insurance story trades on motivation, encouraging the audience to purchase based upon a responsibility greater than themselves, adulting, usually, but all the same, the credibility also of their company has to play a key element in landing and making that story real. And we saw that in your talk yesterday about Allstate. The credibility of looking at about how Amanda shared in her breakout session about how that comes across, and how that story is told. Okay, a little bit of a change up here. Beer is a different kind of motivation, but all the same, it is. By the way, do I get points for being the first to put dilly dilly into an academic talk? Okay. My kids like the commercials too much. It's got me a little worried because they're 7. Now think about this story a little bit. Think about some of the fundamentals we just talked about. This trades on simplicity. And it may not seem like there's a great deal of thought behind these words. They are, dilly dilly, how silly can you get? Find your beach, the Corona ad, and the imagery we see of the fun-loving folks going out and enjoying themselves, or Heineken with their ads as well about people having a good party and a good time. But when you really strip away all of that, what are they motivating us to do? What are they appealing to? Well, how are they relating to us? It appeals to the frivolity in each of us. Every single person in this room, well, maybe I shouldn't generalize, who thinks of themselves as a fun person? Who likes fun? Oh, come on. 3 or 4 you don't, but that's okay. Every single one of us wants to be known as fun in one way or another. And everyone wants to be fun, no matter how serious we carry ourselves. And fun times call for beer. Beer is playing on that emotional string we have, that relatability for frivolity in the human experience. Now, a car, particularly in American society, a car is seen as the ultimate extension of who we are, right? It's our personality. It's the automotive personality. It's how we think about ourselves. And recognizing that, every car ad ever, well, most except for the ones that do about prices and Sunday, they try to make that personal connection, that relatable connection to your personality, right? The practicality of a well-built sedan if you're a boring suburban dad. I don't know who I'm talking about there. The opulence of luxury if you really like the good stuff, and who doesn't, right? But the ruggedness and can-do attitude of a truck. These are stories full of personality, but just in mechanized form. Now, it's a very fair question to look at these fundamentals and these examples, these human elements of story, and say, look, Joe, that's just fine for consumers, but I don't work with consumers. I work with school boards, Amanda. I work with all kinds of other folks. I sell to the government. I sell business to business. This is all fine and fluffy, but thanks very much. I'm done. See you later. But before you do walk out, I will answer that question with another question, which is, at the end of the day, are you still trying to sell something to another human being? And I get it, because that's my day job at Microsoft. I have it a little bit more complicated because of who I have to work with and who we have to sell to and whose story we have to sell to. And when you design campaigns and messaging for enterprise-level IT support that run into the millions of dollars, you know, you got large, complex companies, you got large, complex governments with lots of different approvers. These are people that are serious in the job they're trying to do. And the offerings I work with also are highly complex and technical. It is very easy to get lost in that depth and in the sales conversation. But I think this framework still applies. Through simplicity and truth, we try to outline the impact our support services can have for our customers. We demonstrate credibility by creating a relatable vision of what we can accomplish for them. What kind of outcome can we drive? And then we personify the brand ever so slightly by putting our people and their passion front and center. So you're really buying the people of Microsoft, their passion for making technology work well. Well, that sounds a lot better than a guy that can help me with something. That's the difference. That's the connection we try to drive in our work every day. And that motivates the customer, hopefully, to make that decision to invest in us. Simply put, the way we design things is I want customers to see themselves in our story. And if they can see themselves in our story, before we even sell them that product, we want them to buy that vision or that story. Now, when we think of successful efforts in the marketing sphere, we like to say we know it when we see it. And as us alumni and many current students, and definitely every member of the faculty in this room can say, we cite those examples endlessly in those discussion board posts. I think Geico carried me through a good solid year of the program, to be dead honest with you. But how did they really do it? Right? What exactly makes them successful? And we often point to many factors when we write these posts, right? We say, oh, it's the cleverness of the creative, it's really good. And then some of us quote Don Draper as well. We go back and pull that YouTube clip. We talk about the sweet spot with the segmentation. Again, when done right, it's a beautiful thing. Or maybe it's the really masterful way they pulled together the marketing mix between social and creative and all those other things. But at the heart of it all is story. And each of the examples we know and we love and we study, and all of the future campaigns we're ever going to admire, they have strong elements of story at the foundation of everything we do. And really, story is the key to changing deeply rooted behavior. Now, I wrote this thinking I had an August presentation. It was going to be about 96 degrees. So we're just going to have to suspend disbelief for a few minutes here. So let's pretend it's 96 degrees. Can I talk anyone into something cold to drink? Yeah, probably could. So let's just say we're doing this conference 5 months from now, and it's about a good 15 out and 20 out and snowing. And who wants a nice cold drink then? Okay, can I convince you to have one? Anyone? Yeah, not right. Yeah, but in December. Say we're sitting here a week before Christmas. Yeah, it's not good. Now, especially before Christmas, that's a tricky marketing challenge. You have a cold drink business. How do you solve that problem? And the fun part is, what if I told you somebody already did, and they solved it through story, and they solved it 100 years ago? Anyone recognize that? Now, why did they do that? 100 years ago, a certain cold beverage company in Atlanta, Georgia, was facing a real good drop in sales seasonality-wise, and it drove them insane. Now, one of the things they tried to do, one way you could address this problem is what's in the product, right? Coca-Cola has caffeine. Caffeine, through the very consumption of it, does increase your blood pressure, increases blood flow, does make you feel a little warmer to an extent. So it's easy to look at that and say, okay, well, we might have a winning play here. That play might work for us. Now, but instead, they decided to make a simple, relatable story in just one picture. One that motivates the viewer through the personification of that cold season. And it's good enough for Santa Claus. It's good enough for me. And many thought that, and this ad has been a pop culture staple for a century. Now, Coca-Cola eventually moved on to the polar bears and all these other things. But this has been around forever. Everybody knew what this was the minute I hit the button. So that is what we talk about. That is through story and being relatable and aspirational. Now, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and many, many other brands figured this out as well, because they also discovered that Santa Claus doesn't charge royalties. So that's pretty cool. And when you're another brand suffering from seasonality syndrome like luxury automobiles, like Mercedes-Benz does, you know, not a lot of people want to go buy cars in December unless they really have to. So let's get that brand top of mind. Let's get those Lexus December to Remember ads. Let's get those Mercedes ads out there. Let's personify that in the season. Let's get people thinking, and let's motivate them in that respect. So just, you know, one nuance was swapped out. We went from fun-loving Santa Claus to Santa giving the naughty and nice gifts. The people who are naughty get red Mercedeses for some reason. I think they should get something different, but whatever. You know, I mean, seriously, if someone's going to give me a red Mercedes, I'll be, you know, as mean as possible. That's fine. But that's just, this is rooted in the truth and frivolity of also how the human experience is. How else do we connect with people? Now, this is an actual picture from my actual car. You can somewhat see the reflection of myself in there. Now I drive, that is a '99 Ford Ranger. And it's outfitted obviously with the latest and greatest technology that ever could be afforded to the late 20th century motorist. I mean it. CD player and a tape deck. I'm listening to a lot of my old undergrad radio shows right now. I'm aghast at the things I said. Thank goodness nothing in the 90s was ever posted on the internet. But my daughter comes in the car, in the truck one day this summer, I was cleaning it up, and she takes one look at this radio. And she goes, "What are all these buttons?" And I'm like, okay, yeah, touchscreens didn't exist then. And she looked at the cassette deck and the CD player and looked at it like I looked at my grandfather's 8-track in his Chevy Nova from 1978. So, now, what happened between point A and point B other than the fact that I got old? Okay, I know a lot happened, so we're not going to be here that long. That happened. That happened. Somebody invented something. But the better thing is, people invent things all the time. Somebody had to convince us to change the way we look at media and look at music and the way we interact. How did they do it? Did they tell us, look, you can fit hundreds or thousands of media files on a device, isn't that great? Did they focus on the improved audio quality? Did they price the device nice and low? It's Apple, of course they didn't. So they sold us a story, and they still are. These are the early day iPod pieces of creative here. They sold us a story about culture. A simple and relatable story about the ties that tie us together best as human beings. Music and entertainment. We can disagree on anything. You can get the people that disagree most violently on football fans, politics, whatever it is, but they'll like the same artist and they could talk all day about that. It's not it's that tie that binds, that's how the iPod came to the consciousness of the global population. And the way Apple went ahead and did that. Not just because it's a good product, it was, but not because of superior technology. Others actually had better ones. Technology-wise, bloggers liked other stuff. The experts said other stuff was slightly better, but this is where Apple made the difference. Because they treated the device as a gateway to culture, not just simply a product full of features. They sold a story of that culture. The phones came later, the cultural ties only became stronger, and the framework of this was transported to across the entire Apple product line. When people talk about the resurgence of Apple, this was the cornerstone of that. It was obviously good technology, but it was also very, very strong selling of story. So, a lot of different ways to look at this. With the work I do, I get to work with colleagues and customers around the world, and yes, I can make airplane food jokes, but I'm not going to. Oh wait, I already did. But the point is, I get to go around the world. It's an absolute honor to do that and get a chance to really hear what people think and what really makes a difference or what lights them up or doesn't. And that's where I really became more convinced of the importance of humanity in our work as marketers. Earlier this year on a tour through Asia, I encountered a story from United Overseas Bank in Singapore. And so, by the way, the picture in the background I actually did, that was from me in Singapore where I took that. So we're going to do a little technology switcheroo here. Okay. Now, thanks to UOB for choosing that to be the pre-roll ad they play on Singapore Airlines for a 17-hour flight. I only saw that about 46 times. But it's a wonderful spot, but again, let's deconstruct this a little bit. Let's think a little clinically as we switch back over to the wonderful world of PowerPoint. And then we'll bring up our friend, the Singaporean grocer. Okay, so let's take this apart a little bit. We have the very simple story of a young man trying to convince his old school dad to adopt to more modern ways of doing things. And we also have a very relatable story of that charming old school shopkeeper who just has the trust in his customers and part of his community. And then we also have this motivational element. There is a big bank. UOB is an enormous bank out there. It's just something we've never heard of. I'd never heard of it till I went out there. And they are enormous. They're the biggest bank in Southeast Asia. And they're coming out and saying, what they're really saying underneath all of this, through the story they're selling here, we understand customers of all mindsets. Everyone has a place at our bank. And we don't care if you're the young man who's gone to school and you're convincing your dad he needs to actually write all this stuff down. No, we really are someone for everyone. Now, the candies in the cash register for the children, they make for an irresistible humanizing element as well. You just can't help but love that. So it really just proves, Americans don't just buy stories. Europeans don't just buy stories. Canadians don't just buy stories. Asian folks don't just buy stories. Africans don't buy stories. Everybody buys a story. Everybody. This is an irresistible piece that had an impact on all of you, even though you've never heard of this bank and the whole commercial was in another language. You were able to follow into that. So while we talked a lot about what is in these stories, we've talked a lot about the things we saw and the things we felt. But what we haven't talked about is what we did not see in those examples. So did anyone see UOB's latest rates for small business loans? No? Okay. Did anyone see the exact level of data storage that the first iPod offered? Did they put that on the billboard? No, they didn't. Did we see the exact level of alertness a Coca-Cola drinker would have if they had one, and maybe the increased blood? No, we did not. Okay, good. We didn't see a feature. We didn't get a product description. There was nary a bullet point to be found, and there was no mention of a performance indicator because people don't buy features, they buy stories. That is our fundamental truth. That is who we are working for, and our job is to delight and to enchant and convince, and that's why I think we have the best job in the world. That's the best, and the best thing about the best job in the world, who's got it better than us? All of us get to do this. All of us get to play with language in this way and play with story in this way, no matter what we market or who we market to. So how do we really get started? Well, first, it's simple. You got to craft your story. You got to answer that existential question. And, what does your product do? What value does it provide? How does it make things better? And why on earth should someone know about this? Why are you special? And the only way to really get to that point, to get to that core, is to really know thyself. Know what your product is, know what you're capable of. It's hard to know who you are. I mean, I can write positioning statements all day. Sales plays, yeah, not a problem. Advertising copy, absolutely in my sleep. Literally, I've done it in my sleep a few times. It's a little weird. Now, a 50-word bio about myself when Emily had to introduce me, that's hard. I like football, I make dad jokes. That's all I know, so it's hard, I get it. So what are some of the things we could do to make it easier? Companies are no different than this in their consciousness. Organizations are no different than this in their consciousness. Institutionally, they can get so immersed in the day-to-day that we really don't know what we stand for. It's just not that apparent. But when you really look at it, it comes out. So, it takes a storyteller, really. It takes a marketer to cut to the heart of what things really mean and to know thyself as a brand, and that is at the root of crafting your story. So I'm going to share a little bit of a view into my process. When I started working with a product, and I get told, you can do whatever you want as long as sales go up, okay? That's a lot of greenfield. That's a lot of stuff to try. So I like talking to people. Anybody who has anything to do with this thing, I will talk to. I'll talk to the highest level of leadership that'll take a meeting with me. I will talk to the person that codes it, delivers it personally to the customer. I'll talk to the customers. Anybody has anything to do with this, I'll talk to them. I like to think like a journalist. not like a marketer. That was my first trade before I came into this. Ask questions, listen, gather, and when all that is done, close the door, look at everything, organize. And that's how I get the 3 boxes. Okay, now I know that's 4. I have a marketing degree, not an engineering degree. Okay? So this sort of happened by accident. This may look like a familiar logo to some of you, well, in some way. So as you can tell, I'm a design nerd that works at Microsoft. And as you can tell, we kind of have a logo that looks like that. So I was feeling fancy one day in my new role, and I was like, okay, I talked to a lot of people. I started crafting the story. I started writing things in these 3 boxes, and I wrote the product name in this lower box here. And I filled the other 3 boxes up. But I required myself to use large fonts. And like any good stakeholder, like any good teammate, I sent this around to the product teams. I said, hey, I came up with a positioning statement, how to position us and make this work. What do you think? A week later, I get a call from one of my teammates. Joe, this is outstanding. This is really good. This is really nice. You know what? Just want to make like 3 tweaks. But I'm having a devil of a time writing in these boxes because the stupid font size won't let me go smaller. And I go, yeah, I kind of did that on purpose. And he goes, okay. He goes, can I do that? No. And he goes, can I make the boxes bigger? I said, no. Because if we can't get it done in this amount of space, we don't really know who we are. So we can always get into depth and detail down the line. Not a big deal, but who are we at our core? And that's what this really helped us do in this exercise as a team. So when really crafting the story, I want to also pop out some goals I kept in mind when kind of creating those 3 boxes. First of all, define yourself as yourself. Who are you? Not who are you in the context of your competitors, but who are you? This is a trap we all fall into, and we can be in hyper-competitive industries. Technology is certainly no exception, where people might go, oh my God, Amazon's doing X, Google's doing Y. All of you have similar concerns in your businesses and your organizations as well. People have choices, and that's okay. But it's easy to fall into that trap with your marketing. It's fine to think about the landscape in your product design, but when you're thinking about the core of your story, defining yourself as yourself is insanely important. And I'll give an example of something that didn't work out well. Has anyone ever tried the 3rd pounder at A&W? Anyone ever heard of it? Here's why you haven't heard of it. It was a long time ago, and McDonald's has just rolled out something called the Quarter Pounder. And so the A&W product designers thought, oh, we could do something better. We're going to have a 3rd pounder, and it's bigger, and go market, we're going to call it that, go market that, have it out there. And they did, and nobody bought it. What went wrong here? A couple things. They built their whole story around a feature, a 3rd pound of pre-cooked ground beef, of course not thinking that most people don't care how much ground beef is actually in the burger. But worse than that, and this was somewhat by accident, a 3rd, nobody wants to think about having a 3rd-rate anything. I think of the only brands that really have the word 3rd in their name, and it's Fifth Third Bank, and that's the only one I can think of that actually does reasonably well. But it's a different kind of value proposition that bank has. That's a bank name, not exactly a product name. So lesson of that is, if your product story is an also-ran, your product will be an also-ran. It's just, that's fait accompli for that point. So let's learn from that. It's easy to fall into that competition trap, but if you tell a story that is simple and relatable and inspiring, and you land it well, okay, now we're getting to a hard part. It won't matter who your competition is. People ask me that all the time. They say, well, aren't you worried about this competitor or that one? I go, no. I feel good about the story. I feel good about who I work with. I feel good about a lot of things we do. And if someone really wants, if someone hears us out 100% and still wants to go with our competitor, all right, that's fine. But I'm going to have confidence in who we are and what we're doing. So now let's talk about landing it, though. How exactly do we land it? It's the hard part, or it's the easy part for all of us alums who remember our IMC training very well. So how do we land this story? How do we help the product really embody this story? And how do we, moreover, make people believe it in the office without saying, oh God, it's the marketing people. Oh, how do we get past marketing fluff? Oh. How do we help our target audience believe it? And more importantly, how do we make impact? How do we make it real? So the first thing I'll say is this. As the person at the center, as the one designing this work, no matter what kind of marketing function you're in, you are the gatekeeper of story. And you must lead and embody that storytelling culture. I don't care where you sit on the org chart. You don't have to be the company's chief storyteller to be a champion. And you shouldn't think of it that way. I'll be a champion later when I'm up here. No. Anybody can be a leader. Anybody can be a champion. And this is where it really starts. So that does not mean, however, that you come down from the mountaintop and you decree, here's the story. No, you don't do that. Because no one's going to fall in line with that. It doesn't work that way. And culture is about teamwork. And it's about shared values, and it's about weaving that story into your organization's broader culture. And when we define our stories framework, one of the best ways that I get buy-in is to simply ask, what do you think? And don't ever settle for these answers. I like it, sounds good, or I hate it. The best follow-up question is why? Why? Get that feedback, ask more questions, particularly of your management, particularly of the key stakeholders. Get those people to believe in what you're trying to do. Again, like I said last night, help me understand. Help me understand why this wouldn't work. If you really believe in it, you're going to convince them one way or the other. Or you'll find the right tweak that just gets it in the right way. So to lead and to empower a culture, you must be transparent and not overprotective of those ideas. If you can't get people to buy your story inside the building, how in the world do you expect anybody outside the building to buy it either? So with that in mind, let's just say you've built the story and you've got the leadership buy-in and you've shared that framework and the stakeholders are enthusiastic, even the ones that hated you. So now we must think about our platforms and how we plan to use them. And that's why, of course, you've come here to WVU. And so how do you use your IMC training in the marketing mix? And to me, the mix, it's like the blues. It is not enough to know what notes to play, but more importantly, why those notes need to be played. And in my opinion, as you start to envision your story and how it translates across the mix, you don't want to apply the same messaging pattern to video or social or traditional media, and I believe that's like 6 other sessions, so I won't go that deep. But what I will say is this much, as far as my preferences. In video, I like to show passion. I like to show emotion. I like to show connection. For social, definitely, I love to play on connection. What's a connectivity point as we're scrolling fast through that phone like we saw yesterday? Traditional media, sales guides, the web, by the way, they're not dead. You still have to do them. There are places where I like to be more balanced. I mean, in those cases, people are coming for all kinds of things. So you have to really think in a few different places. Now, that's just me. And that's just my business. You'll find what works for you, and it's important to think about how you'll work across platform with the story. And really, how do you make sure you're successful about that? It's simple as ABC. Always be checking. And with each piece of collateral I create in my work stream, and I'm fortunate to work with some incredibly awesome people, including another WVU alumnus on this stuff, I pull all the relevant materials together. We look at the technical documents, the customer testimonials, all that kind of stuff. But at the very top of organizing my thoughts are these. Every piece of collateral must have the 3 boxes represented. What we saw earlier here a couple slides back. What we discussed in 3 boxes must be there. That is a key element of quality control. Now, whether you work in a team or work alone, it's always important to kind of give your materials that once over, and I don't just mean a spell check, and I don't just mean a grammar review. I literally mean, are we being true to ourselves in this communication? Are we being true to ourselves in how we're representing the brand here? So sleep on it, look through it, ask yourself, do I see principles here? Are they shining through? And if you can't see it, how do you expect your customers to? How do you expect your audience to? Now, what does success look like for a good story? If the goal is for people to buy a story, there is but one definition of success: winning. I follow the Al Davis rule because I grew up near Oakland. Just win, baby. And did we drive sales? Did we increase market share? Did we help the organization accomplish a strategic objective? Can the effectiveness of our messaging be tracked against those things? If you're not thinking about that from the beginning, you need to find a way to make sure you are. And page views are good, click-throughs are nice, lead generation is helpful, but did you move the needle? Did people buy the story? Did people buy your product? Define your success from the beginning. And in the end, you'll be able to demonstrate the impact of the story you developed. So finally, as we look to kind of start to close up here, we've gone through a lot of concept, we've gone through a lot of execution and some good examples. Hopefully you thought they were good. But let's not forget one thing. This is a fun job. Don't forget to live your story. You're going to have to live with this and be the champion of this, and that's okay. Have fun with it. Recognize it for what it is. If it's silly, if you're marketing dilly-dilly, then enjoy yourself. Be silly with it. Put the stupid cardboard cutouts on your bulletin board. Have a good time. And if it's serious and you're selling a serious product to people and it makes a big difference in their lives, well, make sure that shows too. Okay, make sure you have that personality in your kind of, that determination in your campaign and your materials and your mindset as you're really putting this together, because your passion is what shows through in that story. And story is not just something that you create one day and you check a box and you stick it in a drawer. It's not how it works. It is living and it is breathing. It will have to change and you will have to change. So I say this, be open-minded. Have a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset, about the stories you create, direct, and maintain. The story you create today may not be the story that works 3 years from now. And always be on the lookout for what you can do to improve the story. These can be business conditions, changes in the landscape, or the good old-fashioned, time-honored tradition of taking a little bit of that guy's idea and a little bit of that person's idea and a little bit of her idea and saying, look, I did this cool thing. That's okay too. And so that's okay. That's what's going to have to happen as stories evolve. So have that growth mindset. Don't be afraid of change. Don't cling to the stories you create. Change is inevitable and change is good. Improve your stories. Evolve them. And from time to time, accept the occasional failure and learn from it. Yeah, I said failure. I said failure. We've all been there. We're going to be there again. But as Winston Churchill once said, success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. So live your story. The good, the bad, the ups, the downs, have that attitude. And doing so with a smile on your face will only increase your credibility, confidence, and skill as a master storyteller. All of that will only improve the impact you have on your business and effectiveness as a marketer. Because as I hope we've all learned today, people don't buy products, they buy stories. So Morgantown, thanks once more for having me out again to share a story with you. And this has been a lot of fun. I'm happy to take any questions. And let's not forget, there are goodies to be had, so come on. We've got a few minutes. Maybe as you drop off the mic with folks, if that's okay.
Sure can.
Throw goodies.
Oh, it's a close one.
Hi, my name is Anja Festman. I've been with Siemens for 15 years in marketing. I was wondering two things. First, how do you measure the impact of your story on your business? Because that's always so difficult.
Sure.
And the second question is just, does Sender use Microsoft? Did you use the story?
Yeah, so I'll take those. I'll take that in two passes. So how do you measure the impact? I was saying this. I've said this a few times this week. I've been really fortunate to have a very good boss, but that also is the relationship you have with your leadership and how you work with folks. So when you are working with, and this, if you're an agency side, if you're working with your client, you're defining that success at the outset. And so the way my manager and I talked about it is, we're going to launch this story, and we're going to simply A/B test. Like, condition A was before we had it, condition B was after we had it. And our absolute overall goal is drive revenue. Now, how do we drive revenue? Now, obviously, it was create the story and land the story, and yes, we did use all the stories. We did that 4-box exercise happened for 5 different product lines. And that's what we ended up landing, and every piece of collateral we've designed and owned measures up to that. So it's been over 200 pieces of collateral off the top of my head that I can think of. So we defined it as an increase in revenue, which is what we desperately needed. And so using that A/B test and that continued evolution, I believe we grew 30% the first year, 41% the second year. And so we said, okay, well, apparently we're doing the right things. But we also didn't hold on to stuff either, and that was why I wanted to really make sure we snuck that in there. We didn't get too married to what we were, we knew if we had to change a core value or if something wasn't landing, change it. Yeah. Did you pass along the candy?
I sure did.
Oh, perfect. Okay, perfect.
I sure did.
Come on, Seattle chocolates, guys, good stuff. Oh, we got one way in the back.
All right, you'll have to wait.
Okay, I'll repeat back for the camera, it's good.
That's what I got from it.
Absolutely, that's precisely where we wanted to go with that, and thank you for that feedback. And so to capture it for the sake of our recording, a lot of that feedback was along the lines of other brands that have done that, and how does the brand fit into your life? And And that's a big point of that. And that's where I really, as I call it, it's the relatability. It's how, it's at the very beginning of civilization, or the very beginning of the human experience, there was an idea of what can I take with me? What should I take with me? What adds value to my journey? And that is the relatability part of the story crafting. But moreover, you mentioned a lot of consumer brands. I really see this, and now that I've got to use it in a deeper B2B context, I really see it as across all things. And that's a big thing, a big myth I wanted to go bust with this work, was simply to say, look, we were able to make it work with IT contracts. And when you really think about it, when you start seeing things in that context, at least as I've seen them, I see that in political contexts. I see that in the way candidates sell themselves now. I see that in the candidate that wins is often the candidate with the clearest story. If you want to, without even getting political, but just deconstruct what you just saw, who had the simpler, more relatable, more aspirational, motivational story? That's often the X factor. And that goes to so many other things, not just in the consumer space, or the broad-based space, but in a B2B space as well. Is how can I, and that's what I really look to do with my work, is how can I help somebody see Microsoft as part of their long-term journey? Yeah. Yes, sir. Dan?
The president of the company that I work for right now, he has an IT and engineering background, and he's not a marketer. Not that he doesn't believe in it, but he has quite a bit of say in some of the marketing material we produce. We haven't successfully been able to tell our story, as you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying to do that and trying to get my team to do that. How would you recommend going about getting the president of a company to be able to finally, quantify a story about who we are without talking about all the products and services and getting into the weeds?
Absolutely, great question. My answer is this. One of the products I work with is 25 years old, right? It's a very simple, proactive engineering service where we come in and just help you make the most out of something. I could go into super detail, but I won't. But anyways, I ran into a lot of that institutional pushback, because when I came in a role, it was basically the job of the marketing guy is to bless the PowerPoints, make sure they're spelled properly, and upload them to a SharePoint. Okay, that's not marketing. So I obviously had to change a lot on its head, but that's where really getting the stakeholder buy-in. And I don't just mean like creating a story yourself and then walking in to that leader and saying, here's what we're doing, but more about the gathering stage, right? More about what do you want to see? What does your success look like with this? What do you really want to do? Because you're right, there's an institutional push where many places will insist on selling the third-pound burger no matter how bad an idea it is. But that's the sort of trusted counsel that you can bring to the table. And what I like to do in those situations, one of the things people say about me in my work is, you never say no. That's why I like you. I'm like, I say no lots of ways. I just say it creatively. Here's what I like to do, though, is I call out risk. I go, well, you know what? I really want to hear what you think. I want to hear the way you're looking at this as a leader. I want to fulfill your vision. I want to drive your business for you. I want to do all those things. And here are my ideas to help make that happen. What do you think of them? And then you have a good conversation, and then sometimes it'll be, no, we can't do that. I don't like this. I don't like that. Okay, that's fine. It's good that you don't like this and like that. You're the person in charge. It's your candy store at the end of the day. But here's what I will say. I feel like if we don't follow these steps, this is the risk I'm seeing. We may be giving up market share to someone else. We may not be qualifying for opportunities to really grow in this space that we really want to make a big difference. I feel like if we do that, we might not be able to get to where we really want to go. And sometimes that's where a lot of evidence can be pulled in, right? And at the end of the day, if the person's okay with it, well, I guess they're okay with it. And calling risk is an okay thing, because then you're saying, you know what, I'm here to be a team player. I'm here to take care of the business. I'm here to make sure that you're getting the vision of what you want. But at the same time, I need to counsel. I worked with attorneys in my first job at Microsoft. I worked as the communications manager for our general counsel. And it was from that experience that I really pulled a lot of that. Because attorneys, I began to learn, the best attorneys never say no. They simply say, well, you could do that, but you would do 20 to 30. Just want to let you know, so when you're in the cell, I'm just saying, I called it now. So that was a little trick. Yeah, but you're there. You have trusted counsel to offer people. You have a master's degree from here, so yeah, you have a lot to offer. All of you do. So yeah. Yes.
If you're starting out in a company and you're the underdog, how can you put your story out there just like everyone else in the company? You just started.
Sure. So the question being, if you're new in the company, and by the way, as you're passing them down the aisle, feel free to take some. Seriously, there's plenty in the box. So as you're starting in a company and you're the underdog, and by that I mean, is your company the underdog, or are you personally, are you like the new person working up? Okay.
You're just the new person, and you want to explain and show interesting stories and ideas. But
Mhm.
how do you present it in a manner where you're not saying, "Oh, I know this and that," trying to showboat or anything? You just want to present ideas.
Listening. Listening is how you get that buy-in. Listening is the most important thing you can do. And that's how I was able to pull that off, because I came in an underdog position in a product that, by the way, wasn't really going to sell. They didn't think it was going to do anything anymore. And so I came in that kind of a role, but I saw the potential in it, and I was like, okay, I think we can get somewhere with this. And the leadership's attention was on some other things, so I completely get where you're coming from. Even in a big company that could be very successful, you're trying to just make that difference and get that X factor. And the way I really solved for that was listening. Before coming down from the mountaintop, I simply would talk to people, explain who I was, and then how does this work? Why is this good? What makes this great? And like I said, that journalistic almost mindset of really pulling that together, because they'll know the story. They'll know so much of that product better than you, and don't ever pretend to know it better than they do. So you're just there to help it get through the door of a customer. And after that, it's their job to make the customer happy. So that's my best advice on that, is just simply, how do you overcome that? It's the listening tour is a beautiful tool for that. Yes. Hi, Gareth.
Hi, awesome presentation,
No, thank you.
obviously. But my question is this, we're talking about selling products and buying stories, but what if you're trying to change the image of a company or almost an empire in its own right? Like what steps would be done differently? I mean, obviously the theory applies, but is there anything extra that you do when you're trying to change the image of a company or corporation?
Great question. So when trying to change the image, and for whatever reason, Papa John is popping into my head. So I'd say a lot of these fundamentals do apply. But moreover, when you are in a turnaround position, be it bad business performance, be it self-inflicted scandal, be it whatever it is, right? I think commitment is probably the fourth pillar that was off the screen in this one. If I had to go back to remembering my days doing crisis comms, you don't win the crisis by putting out the right blog post or right press release or putting the right 10-word answer in front of a reporter. You win it over long-term commitment to that story and bringing people back in the tent. And you also have to realize, we're not going to win this one overnight. Now, of course, here at WVU, we had the Volkswagen thing a couple of years ago, where WVU figured out, hey, guess what, Volkswagen, you're lying through your teeth about all your fuel efficiency standards. And Volkswagen was very committed to repairing that story. And they've stuck with it for a year. And I believe, they also did things inside their business as well. They also told all their salespeople, you know what, you don't have quotas this year. We know we're getting our tails positively kicked, but we appreciate your institutional knowledge of our cars. We want you to sell as many as you can, make as much commission as you can. But on the other hand, we're also not going to go crazy if you don't make your numbers. And that trust and that commitment to work that out long term and understand that it's a long road back to whatever it is probably the most important thing I'd say. Okay. And we've actually run 5 minutes long, so I appreciate you tolerating my hot air for 5 minutes longer than usual. So thanks very much, everybody. We'll leave some of the chocolate down here.